Hi guys, so today's video is going to be both a non-spoiler book review and then a spoilery chat for The Wicked Deep by Shea Ernshaw. The Wicked Deep actually is a story that takes place in our own world, but there are some fantastical curse, witchcraft type elements mixed in. So the setup is that we follow a young girl who lives in Oregon in this small town that is filled with literally the most morbid people in the world. Apparently all of society in this story is super messed up because in this town, this very small town by the sea, back in the day, there were three sisters who were very charming and beautiful, and people were like, they must be witches. And so the town, they drowned these three girls, and then ever since, around that same time when they were killed, there are suddenly a lot of boys that drown. There's a lot of boys that end up being killed, and people are like, it's the witches coming back to get revenge. And now, 200 years later, people flock to this town to see for themselves. And the idea is that these three girls come back and they inhabit the bodies of three unknowing young girls that are approximately the age that these three women were when they were murdered. And it's there's like a lot of people that are like, oh, you can hear them singing the day that our summer starts. And they do. When I was reading the story, I was thinking like, oh, it's just in their head. But legitimately, the characters are like out on the beach partying, and they're like, wait, you can hear them singing now. The town basically makes a ton of money off the tourism of people that are like, I'm fascinated by the fact that a bunch of teenage boys are probably, well, not just teenage boys, I think like whoever will get murdered. But they're like, I want to see these people get drowned for myself. And then people do start drowning. And our main character is like, I do believe it's a curse. And she meets a boy, and he's like, it sounds like a bunch of rubbish to me. And she's like, I think it's real. That's the setup for the story. I did really like the way that the story was told, because you go back and forth between first person narration with our main character, and then when you're not with her, you go to back in the day following the three sisters and finding out what happened to them, and it all kind of ties together. And I actually really thought that was a cool way to tell the story. It didn't just feel like you were learning about our main character and her potential she may end up getting more involved with everything than she was anticipating, and she likes this boy and she's afraid, oh, what if he gets murdered? What am I gonna do? And so she's worried for him. And then at the same time, you're finding out about these sisters, you're learning about them, and you feel bad for them, because it's just like such an awful thing to be beautiful back in the day, because you couldn't be a beautiful woman without people being like, she tempted me into sleeping with her, so I couldn't be that I have no self-control. She had to have cast a spell. The writing in this story is very straightforward, very simplistic, and because it takes place in our own world, you do have the characters who are teenagers. They curse, so if you're somebody who maybe is kind of wants to know how mature a book is, they do use some strong language in this story. I mean, granted that the premise is pretty dark as it is, I'd probably be saying some strong language too. The story is very, very easy to get into. It's very digestible, and it's got some pretty dark themes. The writing itself, the way that she used description to kind of capture this sort of somber, dark ocean feel, I actually think she did a really fantastic job with that. It felt like a grim fairy tale. I do have a hard time personally suspending disbelief to the extent that I kind of had to with this story, because of the fact that it's clockwork every year you hear the singing on the same day, and then boys start drowning, and it ends on a certain day. It's like an exact time frame. And I'm like, I would be skeptical, and I'd be like, oh, it's just some weird, creepy little town with superstitious people, and I wouldn't believe it. But the amount of people that end up dying, tourists that go there to see it happen, I just feel like at some point, everybody would move. I know that's kind of, I wouldn't even say it's a critique, it was just a personal thing for me. I know it's a kind of dumb, very specific thing to point out, but I find that I probably would have preferred that this was just a different world. Because then, and if that was the case, then I could be like, wow, people in this world are kind of messed up and sort of stupid. I would have just accepted that. Or if it were a different time period and transportation wasn't so easy, because what the heck, if that were happening every year, year after year, I'd be like, we gotta get out of here. I would run away from home. I wouldn't stay there whatsoever. But I don't think that that was such a big deal that you shouldn't pick it up if it sounds interesting to you. It's just, there were a few instances in the story where I was like, ah. I do think, though, that the way in which the people would turn against each other in the story was a good representation of just how quick people are to tap into mob mentality, because the concept is that these three girls inhabit other girls' bodies, and then they are the ones that are tempting boys out into the ocean and then drowning them. So whenever they find a girl who happened to have been in the water around the time that the boy drowned, they're like, it was her, she's a witch, we can't let her go. And they all gang up and like tie girls up. And I'm like, oh, that's kind of actually what people would probably do. I do want to get into some spoilers here now, and then I'll jump to some final thoughts at the end. So if you want to avoid spoilers, you can go ahead and skip ahead to the time that I'll have up on the screen. But switching to spoilers now. All right. Bo was super vicious. The fact that he was totally cool with killing those girls because he's like, well, one of them killed my brother, and I don't care if it's like actually those witches from back in the day. They're currently in that girl's body. If it ends the curse, then sucks to be that girl. That was really extreme. It was super extreme. Obviously, the twist where it's actually Hazel made the love that she felt for him make more sense to me, because for a while, I mean, I was pretty sure that was what was happening, but for a while I was like, I wouldn't love this person. If this person was just so like, well, screw that girl, I'm gonna go murder her, I'd be like, whoa, you're a little extreme. I liked how it wrapped up toward the end of the book. There was that like last little bit about how Hazel, when their bodies were found and she was buried, and in my mind I'm like, oh, she's buried by her former love, and this tragedy that struck, it kind of, she finally gets to be at peace and rest, and I liked that she, in the end, did the right thing, even though she'd been murdering people for a long time. And also, I'd like to add a little side tangent for a second. When Bo finds out, I get that you wouldn't just instantly forget all the feelings that you had for this person that you fell in love with, but also, I wouldn't remember that person fondly for the rest of my life. I'd be like, glad that's over with and I can move on. Anyway, getting back off the side tangent now. So the end of the book, when the person is buried, and I'm like, oh, that was really nice that she got to be buried by him. And then Bo ends up kind of moving on with the real one, and he really likes her, and she likes him. It's like, oh, that's nice. And the town kind of finally is healed and whatnot. I'm like, oh, okay. I liked how all of that wrapped up, and that was the harbor. And then I got to I was like, oh wait, there's more, because it seemed like a really good ending. And we got to land and sea. And in that part, I mean, obviously it's just a preference thing. It's not a like, this book's awful, I hate it. But when I got to that part and it talked about how Hazel, now she's not at peace. She just lurks around the orchard and she's like, hi, Bo, like all the time now, like, I'm on the breeze, and whenever he feels it, he just like knows it's her, and he smiles. I'm like, first off, kind of messed up to your real life love now, and why would you still remember her fondly? I'd be like, shoot, she's haunting me. I would be really upset about that. And then also, she needs to just cool it. She's been alive for 200 years, and she's like, I'm ready for this to be over. Apparently not. Apparently you're very clingy, and you literally just need to die at this point. Just die. Is that really mean of me? I feel really terrible saying that, but when I got to that part, I was like, I don't like this. If I pretend that part didn't happen, and I just think about the other part as the ending, I would say this was a pretty enjoyable read for me. I liked it. It was a quick read. It was a good, like, if I wanted to sit down and be like, I just want to feel like it's fall, and it's like kind of a grim fairy tale feeling. So if I want a book like that, I would for sure reread this story. It was quick, it was interesting, it had a fun little twist that I kind of saw coming, but I didn't exactly know that she killed the brother and the girl's dad. I was like, well, shoot, you're kind of like the worst. Anyway, I enjoyed the story. That last chunk, I wasn't a fan. Some final thoughts of this story. I do think that this had some very interesting moments. And it's one of those stories where there's more to the story than you might think. And I really appreciate that. Like I said, I actually really enjoyed the writing style. It was easy to get into, but also I thought the way that she incorporated the ocean and just the feeling of things, the tone, I thought she did a really good job of capturing all of that. It is a fairly short book, so you're not going to be diving into things too deep. And like I said, there were a couple times that I kind of had to suspend disbelief. The characters, I had a hard time relating to some of them sometimes, but I think it's going to be really enjoyable for a lot of people. If you're looking for a quick, kind of dark, what feels like a fairy tale, I think you're going to really like this. But if you're somebody who wants like epic world building and awesome magic and stuff, that's really not what this book is. For those of you who have read it, let me know your thoughts. And if you haven't read it, let me know if you're planning on picking it up. But anyway, thanks so much for watching. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you guys later. Bye.